Going live. All right, here we are, and I want to welcome everyone on the webinar today, and thank you for. You're going to be listening to two lawyers discuss the topic of pet trusts. My name is Howard Stross, and I'm from Stross Law Firm. Our office is located in Oldsmar, and we have Peggy Hoyt. She too is an attorney. Her office is in Oviedo, Florida, which is not too far from Florida, and I've known Peggy for several years. We first met as the members of the National Network of Estate Planning Attorneys, and I think, Peggy, you are now in Wealth Counsel, correct?
I am a member of Wealth Counsel.
Okay. Are you still with the National Network?
No longer with the National Network, now with Wealth Counsel and Elder Counsel.
And Elder Counsel. Okay. And you're also board certified, not in one, but two areas, correct?
That's correct. Both
Yeah.
wills, trusts, and estates, and in elder law.
Wow. Yeah. And there's very, very few attorneys who are board certified in anything, let alone two areas. In fact, I'll bet.
That's correct, Howard. I think less than 10 who are dual board certified in those areas in the state of Florida.
And so we're really happy to have Peggy, and she's also written a book, and it's got a very clever title that's very true. It says, it's entitled All My Children Wear Fur Coats, I believe. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. All My Children Wear Fur Coats, How to Leave a Legacy for Your Pet.
Yeah. So of all the people that I know, I think Peggy is eminently qualified to discuss this subject and many more. We don't have time for many subjects, so we're going to focus on one that is near and dear to our hearts. Peggy, I know you have canines and felines, and I think you have horses too, correct?
I do have horses. I have 3 horses, 7 dogs, and 2 cats.
Wow. So Peggy practices what she preaches, and I can tell you I have one canine, little Sadie, who is in the picture with me. She is 8 years old, and she is at all of 13.5 pounds, and she comes to my office every day that I'm here. And I know Peggy brings, well, maybe not her horse, but she brings at least some of your pets to the office occasionally, don't you, Peggy?
I do. I have my pet, John Layton, is usually with me every day. We now have a kitten named Forrest, and yesterday anybody who was unfortunate enough to come in would also have met Holly, my mini dachshund.
Is she have quite a spirited personality?
She has a very spirited personality, and for the dachshund lovers out there, I call her Holly the Weasel.
Yeah, I find that having my little buddy Sadie in with me here puts clients at ease. I've only had one client that couldn't have her in the conference room at the same time, not because she didn't like dogs, but because she was allergic and to the dander of the dogs. But other than that, 9 times out of 10, Sadie will be sitting on their lap within 5 minutes of the conference. And
absolutely, I understand, and that happens in our office all the time.
And it's great because it puts them at ease. A lot of times people come in our office and and I'm sure yours too, they've lost a loved one, a friend, or it's something that's not pleasant for them to do, and they're uptight. They may never have talked with an attorney before, so coming into an office like that just makes them feel at least a little bit more at home. And for that, I thank my buddy Sadie, and I know any other attorney like Peggy would do the same. And for those that are listening that don't know about Wealth Counsel, and also the National Network of Estate Planning Attorneys, but Wealth Counsel is the preeminent organization in the United States for attorneys who deal with, in a very I'm speaking very generally now, in estate planning. They also they focus on business planning, elder law, which is, if you will, a subset of estate planning. Elder law certainly deals with estate planning, but many other things. And also you have 2 other lawyers in your office. Is that correct?
I do. I have my partner, Randy Bryan, and we will celebrate 15 years together this year. And we
Wow.
met at the National Network of Estate Planning Attorneys, and then
Oh,
also Sarah Allmiller, who's our associate attorney.
and if I may, I want to brag a little bit about Randy. He is an officer. He's a commander, I believe, or lieutenant commander. I can't remember which, in
He's
the
the
Navy.
commander.
He's a commander now. That's a very high rank in the Navy. And he was in Iraq for a year, which the whole time he was over there, I was very concerned about him being there. But he came back in one piece, and I know Randy reasonably well, and he's a terrific person, and he's certainly a terrific attorney. And both Peggy, I don't know your third lawyer, but I suspect if she's associated with the two of you, she's a pretty good person. And when I thought about having a webinar on the subject of pet trust and just what do you do if somebody gets real sick and has a pet or they pass away, I immediately thought of Peggy. I've read her book. I've been in breakout sessions that Peggy has taught at the National Network, and I followed her career for the last several years, and so I know that she's more than qualified to talk about this. And I was going to ask you, do you find any resistance, Peggy, for people when you say, "Gee, let's talk a little bit about," assuming that they have pets? Do you find people don't think it's necessary to talk about that, or they seem surprised when you bring the subject up?
I think they seem pleased when I bring the subject up, and it would be the rare individual who didn't want to talk about their kids, their pets, or their grandkids. So they're always happy to discuss that.
I have found it sometimes it surprises them. They don't even think about it. In fact, that's the last thing they would think of. Not that they don't like their pets, but we have one client that has horses, but he also has a llama. He used to have a camel. He has a couple cows, lots of chickens. So it's not just dogs and cats, but of course, the vast majority of our clients that have pets are going to be either canines or felines, and but there's certainly a fair amount of them that'll have horses, and maybe even some other animals, such as my one client that I just mentioned. So all of them can be involved in a pet trust. And Peggy, if you would please just do you do you have anything unusual about pet trust that you do or that you want to advise people about that they should consider when they have pets and they want to make sure they're taken care of in their estate plan?
Absolutely. And I think the things to consider that are most important are, number one, who's going to be the pet caregiver, and then who are going to be the alternates to that pet caregiver in the event that that person is unable or unwilling at that time to provide day-to-day care for the pets. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is who's going to be the trustee, the person who's responsible for the administration of the trust assets. And then thirdly, in a lot of my plans, we include what I call an animal care panel, which might be a group of friends and or your veterinarian who acts as an advisory panel to both the caregiver and to the trustee.
Oh, that's an excellent idea. That way, in other words, someone they're not necessarily responsible for taking care, but they can give advice to the caregiver or help them out if the caregiver gets sick or something, or has to leave for a couple of days or something like that. Would they be able to fill in? Is that
Well,
is that
that
part of
might
their
be
job?
one. Yeah, that might be one use of an animal care panel. Other uses might be to review periodic veterinary health checkups to make sure that the animals are being properly cared for. In some events, they might be empowered to appoint a successor pet caregiver if we don't have one that's readily available. And then also for extreme health situations and or possible euthanasia. So just giving that checks and balance to both the pet caregiver and the trustee.
Now, in terms of the amount of money that might be set aside, I mean, every time I bring up this subject about the money that would be set aside. I get often I get references to the lady that was in New York City. I think she owned her family owned the Empire State Building, and she passed away, had many dollars, but big estate, and she left like $2 million for the care of her poodle. Um, I don't think it probably would require that kind of money. And I know in Florida we can't do that. I think people are to some extent might be concerned about that. Do you set aside a specific amount of money, or do you say amount to care for, and then you sort of itemize the things that the trustee and the caregiver should focus on?
Well, there's lots of ways to do that calculation. The case you're referring to is Leona Helmsley.
Yes. Yep.
And she did set aside about $12 million for her dog Trouble.
Was it that much?
Yep, it was that much. And the New York courts actually came in and reduced it to approximately $1 million, saying that $12 million was too much for the dog. I personally disagree with that outcome because I believe that it was Leona's money and she should be able to leave it to whom and how much she wants, and not leave that to the discretion of the court. Mm-hmm. But you're correct, Florida does have a provision in our pet trust statute that would allow for a reduction in the amount left if it seemed to be excessive. So what I recommend to my clients is to carefully choose their remainder beneficiaries, because ultimately that's who could potentially complain about the amount being excessive. And then secondarily, sometimes we leave a fixed dollar amount, so $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, depending on the type of pets or the need of the pets. Or sometimes we use a formula calculation based on the age of the pets and the type of the pets, and then how much money we spend currently for the care of our pets. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can do that. Each individual client situation is going to be different. I do have many clients, Howard, that want to leave their entire estate for the benefit of their pets, because they want to make sure that the pets really don't ever run out of money. And I tend to err on the side of being more conservative, in the sense that if they want to leave 100% of their estate, I encourage them to do so, but with the caveat that we choose our remainder beneficiaries carefully.
And then also, once you've done that, though, of course, and the pet does, or pets do expire, then there's a remainderment out there to receive whatever happens to be left over.
Exactly. So there would be some termination provisions in the trust saying that when the last of the pets passes away, the trust would terminate and then be distributed to these remainder or final beneficiaries. And for many of my clients, this would not necessarily be people, but it could potentially be their favorite pet charities.
I see. What are you? Do you find that you have a fair amount of pet provisions in your revocable living trusts for your clients? Is that something you do on a fairly frequent basis?
On a relatively frequent basis. I am known for saying that 100% of my clients do something for their pets, whether it's simply acknowledging the pets and saying that the children will have the responsibility for caring for the pets, to making an outright distribution of the pet along with some money, or in a lot of cases creating that full-blown pet trust with lifetime care provisions for the pets.
Have you ever experienced, Peggy, a situation where the decedent did not plan for the pet or pets, and did you have to petition the court, or in some way try to have the personal representative get the authority to set aside money to care for pets, at least for a transition period? Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Fortunately, I've not had that experience when someone passed away, Howard, but that is not necessarily an uncommon occurrence in the event somebody becomes mentally incapacitated during their lifetime and is now the subject of a guardianship. So
Yeah,
it
that
comes up pretty often in that context.
I have not had to do that yet. We have because somebody's always stepped up and just said, "Gee, if nobody wants Fido, I will take Fido and I'll care for them." And the personal representative knew that individual and knew that they would be cared for, so it was done informally. We've had a couple though. It's been very difficult placing them because they were older pets. One was blind, and I always say to clients, if you have a relatively young, healthy pet, that's going to be relatively easy to have an adoption for or to place. But if you have a pet that's 10, 11 years old or older, and they're blind or deaf or they have some issue, that could almost be impossible to place in some families, and so it underscores why the client should have a provision that deals with that so that there can be a transition, because typically well, most canines don't live much past, say, 14, 15 years old at the most. Horses though, Peggy, how long can a horse live?
I have known of horses that lived into their 40s, but
Oh.
25 to 30 is usually the lifespan of a horse.
Hmm.
But think about people, Howard, that might have parrots, for example.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Parrots can live 75 to 100 years.
Yeah, and most of the time when we see, or at least when I see clients, they're at least into their 50s. Many of them 60s and 70s or older, and so if they've got a relatively young parrot, the parrot could easily outlive them for many, many years. And I have found that also birds can be a little harder to place. Than dogs and cats seem to be relatively easy to place, but anything beyond that, I mean, most people don't have the capacity to care for a horse. That requires, of course, special attention that many people just don't have the wherewithal to do. But then again, that's what the trust is for. If the person has the time and the inclination to want to do it, then the trustee can provide a reasonable amount of money to make certain that the veterinarian is paid in food. And I don't know what it takes to care for a horse. I know you do, but I suspect it's a heck of a lot more than my 13.5 pound schnauzer. So
Absolutely, and you'd be surprised how much it costs.
yeah, there's a lady in my neighborhood that she has, now not where we live, she boards them out, but she has 5 horses, and I can't even imagine what her bill must be. But that even underscores why, if somebody passes and they have 5 horses, they're going to have to set aside or have a fairly solid plan to deal with those horses, quickly, right away. And I mean, and many of my clients have multiple pets, as I'm sure yours does too. But when you get into the larger animals, it's just going to cost more for everything. And it doesn't have to be a real long trust. It can be a provision within a revocable trust, or even an irrevocable trust, I suppose, as far as that goes. Or it can be in your will. You certainly can put that in there. Peggy and I tend to recommend in many instances the use of a trust as opposed to a will, but you would have a trust provision within the will, so it would be a so-called testamentary trust for your pet or pets.
And Howard, those don't work great for pets. I mean, you can do it that way, but I don't usually recommend them because of the time delays from the time of death until the time that a personal representative is appointed and has access to the funds. So usually I would recommend a revocable living trust with a testamentary pet trust.
Yeah, so would I, and I agree 100% with you, Peggy. I just letting folks know that there is more than one way, and rarely, but every once in a while, I get someone that just doesn't want to do a living trust, no matter what. So that is available, but I would say, even with what Peggy is recommending, and I certainly would concur, that you talk with that person, your trustee and the caregiver. Now that might be one and the same person, but if it's not, you want to talk with both of them, and you want to make doggone sure that when you're talking to them, they are not looking down at the carpet saying, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll take care of it." You want to look them in the eye and make darn sure that they really will do what they say they're going to do. I suspect that if you're talking to an individual, you probably know them really or reasonably well, and you know what type of person they are, and if they say they're going to do something, they will. But don't just take it for granted. That is something, anything, whether it's the personal representative, a successor trustee, a caregiver for a pet, uh, your healthcare surrogate designation person, any of those individuals should be spoken with and make sure that they're okay with this and that they really understand that it is a responsibility and one that they have to take seriously. Um, I don't think it's a good idea to have surprise stories. Somebody passes away, and next thing you know, you have 3 pets on somebody's doorstep. So,
Yeah,
but I,
absolutely. And I'm dealing with a case right now where the lady was under the impression that she had created a trust for the benefit of her pets, but in the final analysis, it was not a very effective attempt at creating a trust. And in fact, said that the language of the trust was precatory only, which means that it's only an expressed desire or intent and not really a trust. And as a result, we're having a lot of difficulty with the trustee honoring the provisions of the now deceased person for the care of her 2 elderly dogs, ages 12 and 14.
oh yes, that would be, yeah, there's a high probability that the dogs get that old that they're going to have, just like when people get old, they start having maladies that have to be dealt with, and yeah, and that's a shame that the trustee would take that position. Um, and I'd have to go back and count how many of these we've done in our, but I know we've done at least 25 at rock bottom minimum, probably more than that. And we have yet to have any issues with them. I guess maybe we just been lucky. We haven't had anybody come in that has had a pet and that has had issues, even if they didn't have, because we didn't do the estate plan. They came in the office, a relative, and they want us to help settle the estate, and they've got pets. We've been able to get through it, but it is tougher, and it takes more time, and it takes more energy. And most people, certainly including I know I can speak for Peggy and certainly myself. We cherish our pets. I have always said that my little guy gives me a heck of a lot more than I give her. I try to give her as much as I possibly can, but they don't ask for much. They're pretty non-demanding for the most part, except when it comes to food time, and maybe take them for a walk once in a while. And I think it's the least we can do is just make sure it doesn't have to be a gigantically big provision in the trust, but it does have to be spelled out. And I can guarantee you, if Peggy did the provision, it's rock solid. She'll make sure that it gets done properly, and so would her partners or her associate too, I'm certain. But Peggy is the one that really got me started thinking about this very seriously before I had a pet. And I'm so thankful for her for focusing me on the fact that we've been told many, many times when we went to the national network breakout sessions that one of the biggest problems that people can have in settling a state is tangible personal property. Well, as I understand Florida law, we consider pets as tangible personal property. And I can see people having problems with who's going to have possession and control or custody, and what are we going to do? Is Sally going to have this? All these issues come up. Gee, you're spending too much money on the pet, et cetera, et cetera. You can go a long way, I think anyone can, in their estate plan by mentioning this. And I think Peggy's mention about don't have pregatory language in there, meaning don't say, gee, it would be nice if you would do this. You want to say, you shall do this. In other words, it's a command. You're demanding of the trustee. This is not something they can do if they want to. They must do it. And I think that's the language that has to be in there so that we don't give, by inadvertence, an out to a trustee that, I don't know, just doesn't like pets. Sadly, every once in a while I run across people that don't like pets and they act accordingly. But I would say, based on anecdotal evidence, seeing people come into my office, the vast majority of people love their pets. So Peggy, do you have anything you'd like to add? I promise people on these webinars that I'll keep it to about 20, 25 minutes. And then any questions. I haven't seen anybody ask a question. We will, Peggy, by the way, have this up on our website. And we're going to send you a link too so you can have it on your website. And so that the people can listen to this at their leisure at a later date. And I would, people who are listening to this at a later date, if they have any questions about pet trusts, they can certainly call my office. They can call Peggy's office too. Peggy, what's your telephone number?
Phone number is 407-977-8080, or you can also reach me at Peggy@HoytBryan, HoytBryan.com.
And all of our contact information is on our website, and I know certainly for Peggy. And again, Peggy, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to do this. And I know you love pets, probably more than anybody that I can even think of. And you've done a great service for writing that book, and then all the work you do with your clients. And when I was thinking about going to law school many years ago, I was inspired by thinking that I could do good. And hopefully I have over the years. Peggy, I know, has done good by the things that I've mentioned. And thank you so much, Peggy, for your time today. And I think this information for pet owners is just really important for them. And I would encourage people, if you're in the Oviedo area, or no matter where you are, if you're a resident of Florida, you certainly could never go wrong by checking in with Peggy or any of the lawyers at her firm. Peggy, thank you very much for volunteering your time today. I appreciate it.
Howard, it's my pleasure. And I guess the last thing I would say is until there are none, adopt one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the next time I have the opportunity to have another pet friend in my home, I'm going to adopt, because there's so many canines and felines out there that deserve homes, and they're being put to death at just unbelievable rates. And thank you for mentioning that, Peggy.
You're welcome. And I wish each of your listeners good luck in planning for their pets, and they do make such a big difference in our lives.
Boy, they sure do. Well, to everyone that's listening in, I want to say thank you. And for those that are going to listen in later on the recording, I say thank you too. Again, I have a sincere invitation to contact us if you have any other questions. And with that, Peggy, I'll sign off and say goodbye. And I'll look forward to seeing you much sooner than later.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.